Maybe you are less familiar with the music of Kaija Perry, who's a graduate student of ours here at Andrews University and is joining me right here. Thank you, Kaija.
Thank you.
So Kaija, first off, please tell those who are listening far and wide a little bit about yourself and what brought you here to Andrews.
Oh, sure. Okay. My name is Kaija Perry. I am a grad student here. I'm graduating this May. It's very exciting. And how I came to Andrews is honestly a little bit of it was quite the journey, really, because the one thing growing up I was never going to do, I was never going to do music. Never. Like, that was the last thing I wanted to do. And then the other thing that I never wanted to do was teach. And now what I'm doing is getting my degree in composition so that I can teach music, which is quite interesting. It's funny how God leads. So I was first, I wanted to be an engineer, then a mathematician, and I had this whole long road that then finally I felt like God was calling me to music. And how that came about was I opened an application. I put in information to Berklee College of Music, and they called me and they said, "You're past the deadline, but we want you to send in, your application anyway, and we will consider you." And I was accepted. And then I was like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. And even through that, I started as a sound engineer, and then a music kind of management kind of degree, if you will. And then eventually we came to composition. And I absolutely loved it. I actually wrote a composition for a project management course, and it had such positive feedback from it. And my mom was like, "Maybe you're supposed to be a composer." And I was like, "Maybe." And so I started doing composition and orchestration courses and absolutely loved it. And then I finished my degree, and then felt like I maybe wanted to do my master's. I applied to Andrews. Andrews was the only school I applied to, and I felt so impressed that God was going to lead me here that I actually packed the car and was ready to come before I was accepted. And as I was getting in the car to drive to Andrews, I got the acceptance email. And then showed up and started here, and I've been here, and it's been amazing. I've learned so much. So yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Wonderful. Tonight, Kaija's piece is going to start the program before we move on to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. Her piece for tonight is titled "Through the Mind of a Composer." So please, I know there's a lot going on in it, so as you please tell us a little bit about what we're going to be hearing tonight from you.
For sure. Okay, so when I was asked to write this piece, I had this idea of writing about Beethoven's life as an outsider looking in. And then as I continued to compose and think about the idea popped into my mind. What was it like in Beethoven's mind? What was it like? What did he hear? How many compositions did he have that he never actually wrote out? And then it became a very kind of, interesting idea of trying to take a journey into, as the piece starts, you kind of see this kind of pulling apart of the layers as we travel into his mind. And then throughout the major events in his life, in chronological order, you will hear the pieces that he wrote at those times in the orchestration, in the counterpoint, in the counter melodies. And then I've created my own themes on top as kind of like, maybe these were kind of like the pieces that Beethoven never actually wrote. And so, we journey into his mind, and then we have Beethoven finds love. Then Beethoven finds sadness and heartache, and then as he goes deaf, the tinnitus, it's very literal. You hear the tinnitus, and then he goes completely deaf, and it starts to come back. And then as we go through, there is a point where you will hear some of the themes of the Ninth Symphony in there, which was kind of the pinnacle of Beethoven's success, if you will. And you'll hear that, and you'll hear from a couple of the movements actually on top of each other. And then during his actual performance of the Ninth Symphony, he was a couple measures off in his conducting. So the orchestra and the singers, they had stopped, and everyone was on their feet applauding, and he couldn't see them. He was still conducting. So one of the contraltos came down and turned him around physically so that he could look out and see his success. And so there's a moment in the piece where we transition kind of into this moment that I just imagined, just this surreal experience of him just looking out and seeing the applause and just realizing he had made it. But the thing is that after his Ninth Symphony, he was always trying to surpass the success of that. And it never really happened. And so for Beethoven, his ending was really quite sad. And that's kind of how the piece ends.
Now, you're generous to talk about Mr. Beethoven at length, but I feel as though there's a whole lot, there's even more Kaija Perry in this piece than Beethoven. Does this take us through a journey, take us on a journey through your mind as well?
Possibly, yes. I would say that, I would say that composers, we compose sometimes not so much as people perceive us, but as who we are. And so it can be very fun to step into, like Beethoven, he had such depth in his compositions, he had such darkness in his compositions, and so to get to kind of step into that a little bit was really fun for me, and to hear and experiment with this, emotional. He had such beautiful romantic pieces, and then he had such darkness, and then to kind of listen to his pieces and be like, I wonder if I can do that. I wonder if I can kind of create some depth of emotion in my pieces, and I hope that I was able to accomplish that. So,
I certainly think so. Yeah.
Thank you.
And well, great. Now, and it's actually not that uncommon for composers of our time or even other previous eras to have been asked to write pieces to be paired with Beethoven's music that's going on right just down the road in South Bend. The Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra did 9 pieces last year with the symphonies. So I'm curious, what did it feel like to write a piece to be paired alongside Mr. Beethoven's? Yeah, was this enjoyable? Was it daunting? It was what it was?
It was terrifying, because it's Beethoven, and it's like, here's my piece, and then here's Beethoven, and so my piece is simply an offering of kind of my idea of what it could have been like in his mind, and that's all I can say for it, is that, it is simply my tribute.
Well, I know that many of, if not all of the orchestra members really enjoy playing your piece, because it was written really for us and really reflects what we do together, probably reflects some relationships that you have with people here and the time that you've spent here. So I think we've all connected with it and enjoy playing it quite a bit.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah. Perhaps, well, let me ask you this question. What kind of impression might people take away from listening to your piece today? I mean, of course, everyone's going to have a personal response, but what do you think people might get from hearing your offering?
Well, I really hope that they can have a deeper understanding of Beethoven, as I've kind of gained through studying his music and his life to try and write this piece. I hope that they can walk away being like, oh, this is an interesting idea. And, I think, as composers and of, a while ago, we look at them and we see them almost a little bit detached. But they were very real people, and I hope that, it provides a little bit of personality for him to people, that they can kind of take their own interpretation of it and see a little glimpse of Beethoven in their own way.
Great. Well, my last question for you this evening, Kaija, is looking ahead, what sorts of things do you look forward to doing as a composer? What would be some dream projects that you would look forward to doing, or collaborations, or what other ideas are hatching up in your mind?
For me, I love very literal music, very programmatic music, but with very literal representations in them. I like concepts and writing for how I think that those concepts would sound, and telling stories through my music. That's my favorite thing to do, is to kind of create new ideas and stories through music, very literally. Like even in this piece, you will hear his tinnitus that he had in the beginning of the piece, and throughout, just to kind of represent. You hear the going deaf happening and the heartbeat, and so I really like that. I really like writing concepts, and I hope to further, bring my music, bring light to some ideas and sounds to some ideas that we haven't really thought of in a musical sense, so that I can go out and maybe inspire some people, especially some people who maybe haven't heard of God and who I couldn't reach in another way, that I could inspire them with my music and have a little bit of a wedge and opening door there.
Thank you, Kaija. Yeah. One thing that just comes to mind that I'm chuckling of myself is after my first year away at college, I remember going back to my home at the time and talking to a pastor there at church and saying that, I was back from my first year at music school. And he said, oh, well, how many instruments can you play now then? I was like, oh, it's still just the cello. So Kaija, here you've played violin here, you've conducted there, right? And you're going to be singing tonight. Is there anything else we should know about you?
I don't think so.
Okay, great. So I'm going to let you transition to your next place for this evening, as I will myself too. Thank you for joining us, Kaija.
Thank
and
you.
for your music.